What's up, guys? For OddsChecker, I'm your host, Melissa. I am joined with the sharpest of college football bettors. I got Alex here. We got Joe here. Guys, how was last week?
Last week was okay. I didn't put a ton of picks in last week, and I went 1-1 here on our program, but 1-0 in my pick of the week in that special segment. So honestly, I'm pretty happy with how things are going. 5 weeks into the season, six if you count week 0. I'm 11-6 overall, 4-2 in my picks of the week. So that's
Ooh,
good.
four and
I mean,
two. You're impressive,
if
Alex.
we can replicate this, we're picking selectively. We're picking artisanally. We're only taking games we really believe in, and it's working out.
Yeah, I mean, we are also picking on Monday. The line moves, things
Yeah.
happen, players get injured, they're put on the injury report. So it is a little tough. So that's super impressive. Joe, how are you doing?
Last week I went 3-0, my first
Ooh,
my first sweep on the show. I got the Good Monday CLV helped me out on the Illinois under 45. It landed 44, beat the closing line by a point. So watch the show, get the early lines, and hopefully cash in. So hopefully get another sweep this week.
sometimes it's always good to bet early. You get the lines ahead of time, and then something happens in your favor, and you're like, you're good to go.
Yeah. Very
Exactly.
much.
All right. Well, I'm going to start with Alex. First off, he is the undermaster. Can we use that terminology? Undermaster. Should I think of
Absolutely.
something better?
What a flattering description. But yeah, I'm I'm gonna be on a few unders this week. I'll give you three right now, three picks right now, and then we'll do a pick of the week. I'm gonna start with TCU in Kansas. I'm going under 67.5 in this game. This is a big game, guys. I mean, this is a matchup of kind of shock unbeatens, especially in Kansas's case. Uh, College game day is going to be there, going to be in Lawrence for the first time in the history of that program, of either program. Um, Kansas's offense, though, I think is very, very touch and go. It's a great story. Lance Leipold is a great offensive mind, especially with how he designs run plays. Jalen Daniels is playing really, really well at quarterback for them. But they scored 14 points against Iowa State last week. They needed to cash in both of their red zone drives in order to do that. I think defense is ultimately the strength of the Jayhawks. TCU scored a ton of points against Oklahoma. I think they scored 55 against.
Crazy game.
Yeah, it was a wild game. But I think I watched that game and I really felt that the reason the number was so high for TCU had a little bit more to do with Oklahoma's defense having no sense of how to cover basically anything. It was a shockingly bad defensive performance, even for Oklahoma. I just think that the upper 60s is a bit too high for this game. If when I was kind of doing my numbers before this game, I was thinking that the total for this game should be around 61 or 62 would be a fair number. So I just find it to be good value. If you can get it somewhere in the upper 60s, which you can. I'm also going to take a spread this week. Missouri plus 10.5 at Florida. Just watched Mizzou come pretty close to beating Georgia at the time, the number one team in the country, dropped down to number 2 this week. Florida is better than Mizzou, I think is a more talented team and is playing at home, but also Florida's deeply flawed. And this roster, this is still mostly Dan Mullen's roster of Florida players, lost to Mizzou last year straight up in Columbia. I think that we have seen that this is still a very rough around the edges Florida Gators product. I think Mizzou's defense is good. And also, I think Mizzou has a bit of an ace in the hole in this game, and that they've got one of the best kickers in the country, Harrison Mevis, who might be pretty important to keeping this game to about 10 points or less. If the Tigers are struggling, kind of straddling the line between covering and not late in the game, I feel good about plus 10.5. I think I'd even do it at plus 10. If it gets inside plus 10 as the line moves, then it might be a no play for me this week, just to give you some sense based on when you're watching this. And one more under for now, USC and Washington State. I think Wazoo's defense is a good one. They let Oregon score a decent chunk of points, but a defensive touchdown didn't help in that game a couple weeks ago.
Mhm.
I tend to think that Washington State is pretty good, even though the teams they have looked most impressive against defensively have been Wisconsin and Cal, who have, to put it mildly, some offensive shortcomings. But maybe more significantly, I think the USC defense is rounding into form. Played really well a couple weeks ago against Oregon State. Oregon State has a more potent offense, I think, than Wazoo does, and I think that USC is going to play decently. So you never know with an Alex Grinch defense, but they're going to play decently in this game. I think 61.5 is a little high, so I'm going under here as well.
Got on the trail of that. How do we feel about USC? I did put them in the college football playoffs 2
Possible.
weeks ago. What do you guys think still? We're still on that path? I think they're performing very well.
I think they're on track. I don't know. They haven't
They're
really
my dark horse.
They
So
haven't really contested so far. I know they won that close game at Oregon State, but I wouldn't really call that a really tough game necessarily. I mean, they won. It was only -6. They didn't look that great either. I'm gonna need to see a little more out of them.
all right,
Yeah.
well, we'll see what happens. We got Alex's picks. Joe, it's your turn now. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I'm rolling with 3 spread picks this week. My first one is going to be Arkansas at +7. It was +6 last night. It's kind of moved to 6.5, 7 range. I like it even more. This is a more of a narrative play for me. Fade angle of Mississippi State. I was on Mississippi State last week. They were in a fantastic spot against the Texas A&M squad, who was reeling off some short wins. They barely won a couple games, and they had to go into a tough environment in Mississippi State, and they got crushed. Now I'm on the opposite side. I think Arkansas is due for a big game. They've had a very tough schedule. They should have beaten Texas A&M. They missed a field goal. They came back against Alabama this weekend, made it a 5-point game, and then the wheels just kind of fell off, and they gave up some random 70-yard touchdown runs in the fourth quarter. It was very random. It was kind of off game script. That game was kind of destined to be close at the end, I think, after Bryce Young went out, and then some random chunk plays just kind of blew the game open. I think Arkansas State and their run game is going to be able to keep this close against Mississippi State, and Arkansas has a fairly good pass defense. Last season, they kind of got known for their pass defense. They play kind of a zone defense that can cause a lot of turnovers. I think it's going to cause some problems for Will Rogers in that offense, and I think this game stays within 7 points. And then the next play I'm rolling with is going to be Maryland at -3.5 against Purdue. This is pretty much a straight fade of Purdue.
Wait, I have a question. Now that we both have you here, you're wearing your Maryland shirt, you're bed in Maryland. What is a terrapin? The Maryland terrapins, right?
Oh, it's a turtle. It's a
Turtle.
specific type of turtle. Yeah, absolutely.
Turtle!
Absolutely. Yeah.
Turtle.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Thank you, guys. I used to have a turtle once. It got hit by a car and died.
Oh.
Yeah, no, tragic story. Anyways, continue, Joe.
Yeah, we are betting on the Terrapins, the Turtles this weekend. This is more of a fade angle on Purdue. Purdue has been a team the last couple seasons that always seems to show up as double-digit underdogs. They had a huge win over Ohio State a couple years ago. They just play really well in that role as an underdog compared to being a short favorite or short dog. They beat Minnesota this weekend. Everyone was high on Minnesota. Minnesota, like one of the best teams in the country. Now it's kind of looking like Minnesota was just playing a very weak schedule. They finally played a solid Big Ten opponent, and they got exposed a little bit. Now Purdue has to go on the road again to Maryland, who has a much better high-powered offense compared to a Minnesota team who's more of a ball control, possession type offense. And I think this is going to be a very high-scoring game. I might look at the over here too. But this is just a fade angle of Purdue coming off their big win. I don't think they're going to be able to recreate it 2 times in a row. Books are giving them a little bit more respect, considering this line is in the 3-4 range compared to the 6.5, 7, 8 point range. I think that is going to be big. I think Maryland wins this game in a similar spot to how they beat SMU earlier in the season. I think they win this game by 7 to 10 points. So I think there's some value at 3.5, 4 on the spread here. And then the last one I'm rolling with this weekend is going to be Texas A&M at +25. They always seem to play Alabama tough. They have the defense to keep this game close. There are a lot of questions about Texas A&M offense and can they put up points. Well, we've seen the Alabama defense be a little vulnerable this season. They gave up a big lead this weekend against Arkansas. They gave up 23 points. They've given up a lot of yards, and I think Texas A&M is going to be able to move the ball a little bit. There's some questions about Bryce Young and his health, if he's going to play. I'm not sure the severity of his injury, But if anything, he's not going to be at 100% this week. And so I does think that hinders their offensive production a little bit. I think 25 points is a little too many considering how well Texas A&M has played Alabama historically. So I'm going to roll with Texas A&M at plus 25. I think Alabama wins this game somewhere in the 14 to 17 point range.
Wow. Texas A&M has done pretty well for us on this show so far. We've only had one bet, but
At least
I'm
for us,
just saying.
not necessarily for Texas A&M. Yeah.
With that being said, let's look at another Texas team. Alex, we're doing pick of the weeks, and we're going to start with you. You are looking at the Texas versus Oklahoma game. The Texas Longhorns are battling the Oklahoma Sooners. The Longhorns nearly upset Alabama in week 2. And on Saturday, Texas scored 28 unanswered points to start the game against West Virginia. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I'm going under here again. Unders have treated me well lately, and I've found some value in them.
I call you the Under King.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So I have this at 65.5, and I think anything within a point in either direction of that, I'd feel pretty good about the under just from a value perspective. Good chance that there's 2 backup quarterbacks in this game. And this is one where maybe if you want to wait until later in the week to get some sense of what the line is of what the quarterback lineup is going to look like. Dylan Gabriel took a nasty cheap shot to the head against TCU. Quinn Ewers has been hurt for Texas, and Hudson Card has been in for the Longhorns. It's possible that one or both of those quarterbacks is back. Again, if you're the type who'd like to wait and try to find that out, that's fine. You can do that. But I think either way, I'm just not sure how sharp either offense is going to be in this game. Oklahoma's defense is the big red flag, no question, for any under, because this looks like a horrendous Oklahoma defense, like a really, really horrendous Oklahoma defense. My suspicion is that they're not going to be quite as bad, though, as they were against TCU last week, just because it is hard to replicate that kind of bad. They look like they'd never seen a zone read before. Their safeties look like they had never played safety before. Some of these things should be correctable if you spend even 10 minutes looking at the film of that game. And just tightening some things up if you're Oklahoma. But mainly this is a play that I think the offenses are both in a somewhat reduced state, the kind of reduced state where I think low 60s is a better total for this game. You know, I could absolutely see this game being somewhere in the 34-30 range, and that would keep us safe at this number. So I feel good about the under for the Red River rivalry.
All right, the Red River rivalry. Now I gotta ask you, Alex, and I'm gonna ask you too, Joe. How do we feel about Dylan Gabriel? He was a UCF quarterback. He tried to sell socks with his face on it, and everyone laughed at him, and he made no profit. Just want to throw that out there. I'm clearly not a fan of him since he left UCF. What do you guys think of him?
He throws a great ball, and I hope he's healthy, because what happened to him in that TCU game was horrible to see. I thought it was an unnecessary hit by the TCU defender. And Gabriel
scary too. Kind of reminds you of Tua this week. Did you guys watch the Dolphins game on Thursday?
Yeah, you hate to see
that was scary. Very scary.
It looked like he was having a seizure. It was insane.
Yeah, it was scary to see for sure.
Well, we'll see what happens with Tua. We'll see what happens with Dylan. Joe, you are looking at the UTSA versus the Hilltoppers. We talked about this right before the show started when we were just, shooting things around. Does anyone know what a Hilltopper is? I really need to know.
I'm not sure what a Hilltopper is, but I'm rolling with them this week. This is another narrative type play for me. I'm on the fade UTSA train. UTSA has had a very tough schedule to this point. They had to go into Texas. They played Texas tough for 3.5 quarters, and then they started turning the ball over. And they played Houston tough for 4 quarters, and then they went into overtime, and then they lost. And then they came back and beat Army in overtime. They've played a very tough schedule this far. They were coming off a game this past week, midweek game, where everything kind of finally aligned, and their defense still gave up 30 points, and they ended up winning the game. They covered, but they gave up 30 points. The defense hasn't looked good. So my play of the week this week is Western Kentucky plus 5.5. I think Western Kentucky can win this game straight up. I kind of expect them to. They have a new quarterback, Bailey Zappi, he lit up NCAA last year in passing. Now we saw him this weekend for the Patriots almost go into Lambeau and get a win. So Bailey Zappi was really talented, and Austin Reed, D2 transfer, one of the best quarterbacks in D2 for the last 4 years, has now come over to Western Kentucky, has played extremely well there. He's throwing the ball all over the yard. Looks like they haven't missed a beat without Bailey Zappi. UTSA just can't stop anyone. They give up a ton of yards. They rely on Frank Harris, their experienced quarterback, for a lot of offense, and he's done really well this season. They don't have Sincere McCormick, who was one of the top running backs in the country last season. He's gone, so that's put a little more pressure on Harris to do a little more for that offense. And what it's led to is a lot more turnovers. Frank Harris has thrown a lot of interceptions this season, and he's thrown a lot of pick sixes, which is kind of weird. A lot of his interceptions have gone all the way back for touchdowns. So that's a little odd. Their offense turns the ball over way too much. They get a lot of yards, but they also turn the ball over a lot. Western Kentucky has not turned the ball over. They've looked very well so far. I think Western Kentucky goes into UTSA and gets a win straight up.
Well, I mean, UTSA are the Roadrunners, and the Roadrunners have always defeated the Coyote, right? In Louis too. I'm liking the pick. That's all I'm saying. Alex, what do you think about it?
I like it as well. I think that UTSA is an exciting story in college football the last couple of years, the way that Jeff Traylor's built that program. But I can't argue with Joe that they can't stop anything. And Western Kentucky looks much more solid than a lot of us thought. I think a lot of us thought Western Kentucky would be iffy because they sort of did a 1-year wholesale import of an offense from an FCS school. It worked great, but then the coordinator left, quarterback left, a lot of their skill players left. It seems like Tyson Helton has pulled it off again. So I like Western Kentucky.
Okay, guys. Well, before we get into my pick, and Alex disagrees with me, let's talk about that Pittsburgh game. I took 21 and a half. I don't even think they hit that. I think they did eventually at the end hit that in terms of total points. What the heck happened there?
I honestly didn't even watch a second of that game, so I have no idea what the final score even was.
Pitt, I think it was 26-21 or something on that order for Georgia Tech, but it wasn't actually that close. It was a 2-score game late. Pitt's offense just has fallen apart this year, unfortunately.
It had to fall apart when I picked them, right?
Georgia Tech was so bad that I thought it was a respectable pick, but sometimes you get a dead cat bounce under an interim coach, and I think that happened in the case of Georgia Tech.
All right, well, it happens. As for me, we're going back to the UCF. I'm not picking them. They are playing Wednesday, though. Their game got delayed because of Hurricane Ian. I am picking in their conference, though. The Houston Cougars are taking on the Memphis Tigers. They'll be at Liberty Bowl Memorial Stadium. I'm taking the Memphis Tigers. They are -2.5. Guys, initial reactions, what do you think?
Yeah, I like Memphis. I think Houston.
Ooh, good.
Houston is a fade team to me. They almost look like they've quit on. I think Dana Holgerson is the coach, and they just look like they've quit. They lost to Tulane this week, and Tulane had a third string quarterback play the whole game. The second string quarterback, who had some experience, got hurt on the 7th play of the game and didn't play at all. And then they lost to a team with a third string quarterback. He could barely
overtime too. So
yeah, he could barely complete passes more than 10 yards down the field, and they still lost. Houston is a complete fade for me. I think they've lost all will to play under Holgerson, and I just think they're a fade. So I like Memphis.
And then as for Memphis, they played Temple last week. They took a 21-point win. Alex, what are your thoughts?
I'm also kind of anti-Houston.
I love it. I'm not a fan of Houston in college basketball or college football.
Yeah.
So
looks like a bad situation for Houston this year. They've declined considerably. They're not a contender in the American, so I'm with a Houston fade.
I mean, on Memphis' side, they took a sizable loss to Mississippi State in their season opener. They bounced back in week 2 against Navy. The Tigers were able to keep the wins going and over Arkansas State and North Texas. Like we said, they matched up against Temple on Saturday, and they couldn't score in the first half, but got the better end of the deal, and they won 24-3. Quarterback says Hennigan, he logged a touchdown, and it was 195 yards total. Brendan Thomas, 20 yards rushing. I think this is a good thing. Plus, let me give you some betting stats right now. Memphis has covered 2 spreads over the last 5 games, and I know that kind of sucks, but Houston has only covered once this year. So I think we're in a good spot.
Let's see it.
All right, I'm excited. I love when you guys agree with me. I know the Pittsburgh thing didn't work out, but we'll see how it goes this week.
Yep, I like Memphis again, so hopefully we get that one.
All right, guys, for OddsChecker, we're going to close up the show here. We will see you for week 7, but hopefully you enjoy week 6. I'm Melissa, joined with the sharpest bettors, Joe and Alex, and we will see you guys very soon. Happy betting.